North Korea is one of the most isolated and aggressive countries on the face of the planet, the scorn of the international community and the subject of unceasing, increasingly intense sanctions that have strangled the country and often prevented it from feeding its own people. These sanctions are, of course, deserved. North Korea is responsible for numerous human rights violations and refuses to engage in any meaningful international cooperation whatsoever. Since the end of the Korean War, North Korea has maintained a strong resistance to foreign affairs and foreign ideologies, maintaining its own form of Marxism-Leninism known as Juche. But this video isn't about the foreign affairs or the diplomatic relations of North Korea. Rather, this video is about the economy of North Korea, because despite its many failures and intrinsic problems, the economy of North Korea stands as a testament to how a hermit kingdom and how an extremely isolated country manages to allocate resources and labor, even if it does so incredibly poorly. Estimating gross national product in North Korea and other factors generally used to gauge the size of an economy is difficult because 1. There is a significant lack of economic data due to the country's isolation, and 2. The North Korean won, the official currency for the country, is non-convertible, meaning it's not easily exchanged for any other currency used on the international market. The South Korean government's estimate placed North Korea's GNP in 1981, that being gross national product, at $22.9 billion US dollars, or $1,038 per capita. In contrast, the gross national product of South Korea was $237.9 billion and a per capita income of $5,569 in 1991. And North Korea's gross national product has steadily declined ever since the 90s, collapsing during a massive famine in the country and continuing to stagnate ever since. By the 1960s, markets in North Korea had been suppressed almost entirely, which meant that all items from food to clothes, which had traditionally been handled by a market system, now had to be directly distributed by the central government, and money possessed only a symbolic meaning. Food depended on hierarchy in the system, meaning that the more authority you possessed in the government or the military, the more rations you would receive by the central planners. This also means that on the local level, North Korea has to respond to information collection in a different way than markets do. Markets typically collect information and perform resource and labor allocation based on the decentralized nature of the market itself. That is to say, actors in a decentralized market generate information which is then responded to by business owners, and in this way they're able to allocate resources and labor to consumers. This does not exist in a centrally planned economy, so in order to collect comparable amounts of information to a comparable degree, North Korea uses planners on a local level which then report to the central bureaucracy. Because North Korea is almost entirely agricultural and lacks the necessary infrastructure to perform large-scale industrial output, they were reliant for a long time on the Soviet Union for considerable imports, including raw materials and machinery to be used in the labor process. This, however, meant that North Korea's economy would forever be tied to that of the USSR, and of course, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it nearly took the North Korean economy down with it. As a consequence of this, the restrictions that had existed on private sales, including grains, ceased to be enforced. In the 2000s, your average North Korean family drew approximately 80% of its income from small businesses that, while they were technically illegal, went unenforced, meaning the North Korean government did not step in and destroy these private businesses because it was effectively the only way for the majority of North Korean families, especially in rural areas, to draw any sort of income. Urban and farmer markets were held every 10 days as early as 2013, and most urban residents lived within 2 kilometers of a market. So despite the economy still ostensibly being centrally planned, typical market exchanges are alive and well in North Korea and have been for quite some time. In 2014, North Korea announced the quote-unquote May 30th measures, which provide more freedom to farmers, allowing them to keep a majority of their produce, approximately 60%. But the more interesting aspect of this is that enterprise managers are now allowed to hire and fire workers entirely at their discretion. They can decide who they do business with, and they can decide where to obtain raw materials and spare parts, which begs the question, what's the difference between this sort of thing and a state-owned enterprise along capitalist lines like in China? The answer is not much at all, and you can see that as time goes on, North Korea is gradually becoming more of a market economy and less of a centrally planned economy, largely out of necessity, because GDP growth under the centrally planned economy has been marginal, if not non-existent, for several years. North Korea's largest trading partner is China. Most of the goods and services that come into North Korea originate from China, while North Korea itself is relatively low as a source of imports to China. The entirety of North Korea's economy is essentially dependent on China's economy. 95% of all goods that enter North Korea come from the People's Republic of China, which means that if China were to stop doing business with North Korea, you would expect North Korea's economy to collapse within a matter of months, if not more rapidly than that. Between 2000 and 2015, trade between China and North Korea grew over tenfold, reaching a peak of $6.86 billion in 2014. However, North Korea faces an increasingly dire economic situation, largely because China is slowly stepping away from its long-standing relationship with North Korea. In February 2017, China restricted all coal imports from North Korea until 2018. On September 28, 2017, in response to United Nations Security Council sanctions regarding a nuclear test earlier that month, China ordered all North Korean companies operating in China to cease operations within 120 days. In January 2018, customs statistics showed that trade between China and North Korea had reached a historic low, and China closed its border in late January 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, meaning trade between the two countries nearly halted. This meant North Korean imports from and exports to China were both down by over 90% year over year in March. On May 7, 2013, Bank of China, the biggest foreign exchange bank in the People's Republic of China, joined other international banks in closing the accounts of North Korea's Foreign Trade Bank, its main foreign exchange bank. Although no reason was provided for this, it's widely assumed that it was in response to sanctions placed against Bank of China by the US for its alleged assistance in the North Korean nuclear weapons program. Ultimately, North Korea's centrally planned economy suffers from the same problem as other centrally planned economies, that being a twofold issue. The first is that centrally planned economies have a tendency to experience very rapid initial growth and initial expansion, followed by a very gradual decline in economic growth, leading to their eventual collapse or replacement by a market economy. In China, the centrally planned economy was eventually replaced by a market economy. In the Soviet Union, the economy simply collapsed due to a consequence of attempted market reforms. In North Korea, the centrally planned economy is slowly and very gradually being replaced by a market economy, mainly because, though they had an initial period of very rapid expansion in the 1950s and early 1960s, the centrally planned economy ever since has resulted in nothing but suffering and famine for the North Korean people. Throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, North Korea released a series of 5-year, 6-year, 7-year, and 10-year economic plans designed to increase the role of industry in the country and expand the economy. As is the case with central planning so often, these plans were completely bereft of any meaningful realistic targets and lacked sufficient information collected from actors in the economy on the ground to efficiently allocate resources and labor to meet the targets of the plans. As further evidence for the failure of North Korean central planning, it's important to understand that any time economic information is released pertaining to North Korea's plans, be they 5-year plans, 6-year plans, 7-year plans, and so on, this economic data is almost always heavily inflated and not representative of the actual economic situation in the country, partly by design, as economic failures obviously look very bad to the Kim dynasty and give credence to other countries, namely the United States, which rely on market economies and obviously do not employ any form of Marxism or Juche. Obviously, North Korea also struggles to import resources and engage in international trade, largely due to the United Nations sanctions imposed upon it, but this is not the root of its problem. The root of its problem is relying on central planning, something that has been shown time and time again to not only be inefficient, but also woefully inadequate relative to the efficiency of market economies. North Korea could theoretically switch to a market economy, engage in trade with China and other countries, and experience considerable economic growth, but it chooses not to do this, instead stressing the importance of Juche and self-sufficiency at the cost of its own people starving to death. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was just a quick summary of the economy of North Korea and how it functions, as well as how it has changed over time. My name has been Pogan. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. All of that is greatly appreciated. If you really want to support my work, head over to patreon.com/Poganist. Any and all support you give me over there is greatly appreciated. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.